Well, good morning, all. Glad to see you all back. We've got our Consulting Amigos here and doing expert topics for MicroGiants again. And we've got Ray Anderson and John Mills, two longtime small business people with a variety of experience, and myself, Ron Burgess. Glad to have you gentlemen here. Today, we're going to follow up with the last week's discussion we had, which was really quite interesting, about a Forbes survey, which we we all discussed, and during that period of time, we came up with, and in this particular case, the whole point was that the line that is purple is going down, and so when the line goes down, isn't a good thing. Because that means that the percentage of increase or decrease has crossed zero several years ago. So we decided we better talk about, well, what are the four things that you really need to look at if you're going to start a new business? And this really applies to anybody who's a new business or maybe even an old business. You simply have to do better than what this line is doing. So we decided we would talk about the four keys to starting a business, and we came up with these four particular items here. Uh, we talked, and you can go back and take a look at last week. We'll have a link before. We talked about cost agility, unique value offerings, strategic partnerships, and omnichannel presence. So I thought what we would do today is, because I spent a lot of time talking about value and niches, et cetera, I thought maybe I would just do a little bit more, a little deeper dive into the unique value offerings, so that we could just kind of discuss it for those of you who would like to get a little deeper sense for really how to go about do this, as opposed to what it is and why, but really how. So we'll go there, and so therefore we're going to focus a unique value offering, do hyper-local, personalized, or experience-rich niches. Find your niche in the market. So number one, finding a crack in the market, which just happens to be the name of my book. Do something unique, personal, or remarkably better. And two, create value that your customers will actually value. How do we do that? So we're going to talk about those 2 points here. And to do so, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit.
While you're doing that, I need to interject a little bit. This is all relevant in a free market society. These arguments kind of go away when you talk about a socialistic or a communist controlled environment.
Oh, right, because you don't have to please customers at all.
Well, no, yeah, and you get the right to have a product because somebody allows you to, and nobody else can. So, your niche really isn't a niche that you've created by value. The niche is something you created by relationship.
Right.
Anyway, leaving that aside, so this is a free market analysis of how that system works.
Yeah. So it is all free market, and thank goodness for that. Free markets,
Hey,
free markets are good because what they mean is you get to make a decision about what's valuable to you. And there's a transaction, going back to Smith, there's a transaction value between two people. And one is you're free to make a choice to buy, and the seller is free to sell it. And between the two of you, you agree on the price. So that is what we call value, right? So when we have value, the interesting thing is that it's composed of a few things, and really in the olden days, I mean years ago, used to really struggle because clients would say, well, how do I really create value? What do I really do there? So I built this here to try and explain what value is because first of all, you want to be in a niche, a place where nobody else is. And it's the people in that niche, the buyers in that niche, that are going to evaluate your company and its products for value. Thus the word evaluate, right? I just thought of that, guys. Okay, so typically what happens is that we used to think of value as three components, and that was quality, price, and service. And so when I began studying this, which I did for 6 months or a year, I think, before I finally came to the conclusion that this is not actually the whole thing. In other words, when I would compare my clients on quality, price, and service to each other or to a competitor, that's not who is winning. There was something else going on. Somebody else was doing business, um, and I couldn't figure out what that was or why that was. Well, I mean, until you look a little harder. For instance, if you happen to be a jeans store, and back in the old days, there are lots and lots of jeans only stores, and if you were selling jeans of all types, you might, you might have something that's sort of a fashion type thing, and it works for a little while and it goes away and it works a little while. But then you cross the street, you've got a Levi's store. And the Levi's store is, what are they selling? They're selling Levi's. Why can they sell them for more than a pair of jeans? The answer is they have a brand. And therefore, I began to kick this around and realize that there are four components to value: quality, price, service, and image or brand. In other words, the image or brand is part of the consideration that the consumer makes to whether or not to buy the product. Many people make decisions based on quality because that's most important to them. When I buy a car, I look at reliability. That is what's important to me. And so John has a little different value system for cars because he likes performance and engineering and so forth. But I just like it to run and run and run. And so to me, a Lexus is more valuable in my mind than a BMW is. Because I know John just loves BMWs, but BMWs cost a lot of money and they break down. And
But it's a driving machine, Ron.
well, it is because they're a driving machine. And that is exactly why they continue to sell, is because they have used their brand imaging to sell to a specific niche who really do value the advanced engineering that you do get with a BMW. It's there for sure, no doubt about it. But some of those things are not as reliable as maybe a Lexus brand, which is a little behind on suspension or whatever happens to be going on. So buying behavior cannot be explained unless you put the other image component in place. For instance, vodka is vodka. Now, over many, many years, Smirnoff controlled that world market. Now, this is a little bit old, but we all know Absolute is still around. If you go up to, and I'm not talking about the flavored vodkas, I'm talking about straight vodka. If you go take a look at a large liquor store and you determine how much space there is on the shelf, you will see that Absolute has about 30 times the shelf space as Smirnoff today. Exactly the opposite of what it was, say, 15 years ago. Why is that? Well, there's a whole reason for the explanation, and I go through that in the full lecture. This is about a 3-hour lecture, so we're just getting a snippet here. But basically, it had to do with the way they designed the bottle, and they did something different. Smirnoff has an old, if you can imagine this in your mind here, Smirnoff has an old-fashioned label. Looks like it's been around since, I don't know, the 1920s, maybe 1890s. I don't know. But it was old and stagnant. And when people wanted vodka, they bought it because it was known for quality and it had a brand. But then you had a kind of a change of times, and Absolute, which is not even made in Russia, by the way, Absolute is a company that needed to break in, and they effectively broke the moat around the brand that Smirnoff had developed, and Absolute did so strictly with design. It was 100% image and brand, and now they actually control the marketplace. You can also take a look at the reason that Starbucks gets 3 times more per pound of coffee than other companies. Is it the taste? Is Starbucks, in fact, 3 times better than others? Well, I think the answer is clearly no. Is it 10% better? Maybe, maybe. Um, but the point here is that people like Starbucks mostly because it's Starbucks, mostly because it's developed a reputation, it's developed an image. So when we take a look at these 4 component values, we use a rating system, just to take a look at the feedback from questionnaires, or a lot of times clients would just use this and, they know enough about their competitor to where they just simply fill it in. And so when you do this, you go ahead and you rate it from 1 to 5, say, and then you put together, as you rate them, you just simply draw around them, and you can make comparisons one to the other. So here might be what one, say, product is, and here might be another product. Well, in this particular case, the price is higher. But if the quality, the service, and the image are identical, then what you have is you've got a price component, which actually does really matter because everything else is even. So um, when you're making decisions about how to create value, you need to consider those 4 components first and foremost. So there are lots of sort of subcomponents within those. Quality, for instance. Ray spent a lot of time in manufacturing looking at quality issues and trying to get whole companies organized with their labor force to increase quality and reduce defects and all those things that are important for manufacturing. That's really important because certain buyers make decisions based on quality. The question here is, what's quality? So you have a couple of things. One would be, as we talked about, one would be engineering, and another one would be reliability. Another might be serviceability. Another might be replacement parts in terms of quality. And then there are other things like if you get into, oh, I don't know, Ray, you can probably help me, but very, very small tolerances, like I don't know, a camshaft or something like that. Um, you get it within thousandths of an inch, and it's really important that they fit exactly right. And if an engineer is buying it, like if John is buying a certain BMW and he realizes that there is a certain tolerance value that is done better or closer to him, that's a quality issue. And that would be attractive to him because he recognizes that there's going to be something gained by having higher tolerances. So they go from highly technical to very abstract. You take a look at the quality of a suit. You can go from, well, none of us really buying suits too much anymore, but I don't know, they used to cost two, three, $400, and but they also go up to $2,000 or $3,000. And so I spent a lot of years in the rag business, and you'd go in and you'd take a look at the quality of a respectable suit, $400, $500, we'll say, and you look at that and you go, gee, it looks pretty nice, and you have to know something about it in order to be able to look at the stitching and really see if the stitching is really all that much better. And well, what about the linings and what's the material of the lining? And is it going to, is it going to work, for sweating? If it's a little bit, if it's a European cut and it's very tight, or is it going to otherwise, be a little bit better? What about the fabrication? Not many of us are really very good at understanding the true quality elements of a suit. But if you buy a $2,000 suit, now I've never bought a $2,000 suit, but it's been demonstrated to me by some of my better stores over the years. It's a little different, and it is a little bit nicer, and it's better in a lot of ways. And they can really show you why that cut is a little bit better, why the pants fit better, etc. That's quality. Now the question is, well, is the difference between $500 suit and a $2,000 suit enough for that? Well, I don't know. If it's a Pierre Cardin, maybe. There are several other brands, good Italian brands. You buy the best suit. Those who enjoy those kinds of things can tell how they fit on a person, how it looks. And for in some ways, they can determine, oh, that's a $2,000 suit. What does that mean? Well, it's a status issue, just like, say, the BMW. The question is that are you going to get the kind of quality out of that suit that you would out of the $500 one? And for most of us, $400, $500 probably going to be good enough. That's why you have a very small market at the very elite high end. And that's why the branding is so important to those particular companies. Likewise, service is really, really, really important. And sometimes service is the only differentiator. So when you're thinking about your business, we've talked about these things before, but we'll say in plumbing, what are the issues that makes a plumber the one you're going to call? Now, the price is going to be part of it. But also, you may be, as the smell good plumbers, they found a very good way to simply do something easy because they determined that the woman of the house did not like the smell of a plumber when he came in. Why? Because he was working in sewers at the last place. And so the service itself ended up being the differentiator. Today, in small businesses, sometimes service is the only differentiator. And so when we talk about these various ways to start a business and realizing you need to get into a niche, the niche really helps you, as we talked about last time, helps you develop a moat around your business. If you develop a brand, that's the form of a moat. There's a particular company here in town that does heating, air, et cetera, et cetera. They charge a lot more for it. John's done evaluations of this because he does a lot of that kind of stuff in his buildings. And, it's not worth it to John because John understands the components really well, the quality, the service, the pricing. And he doesn't look at the branding so much. But for somebody down the street, if you're going to recommend someone and you want them to get somebody good, you'd recommend them
Oh,
because
absolutely.
they know that you're gonna get, mostly what you pay for, and you're gonna be happy and it's gonna work. It's not gonna be some guy that comes in and charges you a little money, gets some money up front, never shows up. You're gonna get it done. And so if you were to go into that business, what are the differentiators that you would do? How do you develop that using, these kind of criteria? So I could
Yeah.
go on forever, but I'd like you guys to join in just in
On
talking.
the service
So,
industry one that we were just talking about, for example, on home and material product servicing, whether it's an automobile or whether it's a house, you're right. There are some people who are not mechanically inclined. And so they want to buy a product from somebody who can maintain and service it, and they will pay 20-30% more for that service than perhaps if you were doing it as a DIYer. Uh, but there's value there. There's value for that person there
yeah,
because they don't have to try to figure it out, to understand it, do the math calculations in the background. They are they just simply would like to negotiate with somebody, agree on a price, and pay it, and it'll all be done well. And so that's why the companies that are slightly elevated in price but high in value and exist.
right.
Conversely, there are other companies out there that basically pay for the technical thing, the small piece of the puzzle, and they
Right.
don't really do the research. They don't do the backup. There's no warranty, and that's a whole different game. So I guess you're right. Which market are you going to service, and then which area of provisioning are you going to go and work into? And once you establish that, then you better deliver it because
Mhm.
we know of some people who in the HVAC industry that they like the pricing of the larger companies that are really well established. So they take their pricing and then they apply it to their smaller entity, but they don't have an answering service. They don't
Yeah,
have somebody who deals with the city and the permits. They're doing it as a startup company, but they're charging a big price. Well,
right,
that
right.
doesn't work.
No. And it doesn't take very long for people to realize that. If you have the the plumber that I use right now today, I really like. and his prices are really good. And I've done some plumbing before. I know a little bit about plumbing. Don't know much about HVAC, but he's a good guy. He works really hard when he's here. He's very, very valuable. Um, uh, by the same token, I had to learn to trust him, had to have him over several times in order to see that it's going to get it done. And I know what quality is in plumbing. I'm not sure if that's a great attribute, but I've done enough repair work in houses and buildings that I've had over the years to know enough about how to get it done and how much I don't really enjoy it. And so I'm happy to have. But in his particular case, it's like, well, how does he grow? And the answer is he has to continually to deliver. He can't disappoint me, and therefore I will send him to anybody who asks me about plumbing,
Right.
and he'll be a good guy for the individual homeowner who learns to trust him over time, and he's building his moat based on his own reputation and brand, along with high quality. Now he's not going to have a night service. It's him. Uh, I think he actually would get out of bed if I had a real emergency. I think he would show up. It's not what he wants to do, but for the most part, if you need X, he's going to say it's going to be a day or two because he only has limited capacity. He's got one helper. The helper has shown up before and done the job just fine. It's, sink plugs, plug ups and stuff like that. So, he's got one helper. He's not quite big enough to be a full service plumbing outfit though. And so the question is, does he grow? And how does he maintain that moat? And in his particular case, it's like when you see it, it's like Schwab. They show the salesperson running to your car, and when I see him, once we've had our conversation, he is not running, he's walking very fast, and his helper is too. And you know that you're going to get a lot of work for the every hour you pay for, and he's going to charge you a low hourly rate compared to everybody else. That's how he's building a moat around his business. That's how he's creating his own niche. Now, a lot of people can be in other niches, but once you have and own your customers, nobody else can get in. It's hard to steal customers from somebody who's done a fabulous job at a little lower price than somebody else.
So these niches are changing a little bit. Um, I'm going to give an example of our large supply stores in the building industry, stores like Lowe's, Home Depot,
Yeah.
these guys. And one of the things that's going on is they've been attempting to keep the profitability up by keeping their employee costs low, their automation high. So there's these things going on in the background. But I've noticed something that is happening that I think is more governed by an accounting spreadsheet than it is by serving the client. And that is in the general contracting business, Home Depot and Lowe's, I'm going to use them both, have HVAC equipment, they have, or ducting and things, they have plumbing things. And I've gone in there and I've noticed that the scope of their product is shrinking. And
Mhm.
so they've now, what they're doing is, in the HVAC world, a lot of houses have 8-inch ducts or 10-inch ducts. Now, it happens that every system that's built has some 12 and 14s as well, but they're not stocking that stuff because there's only a little bit of core for it. And once the system's been put in, you don't normally modify your 12s and your 14s in larger houses. But you do have 8 inches that you need to extend and 6 inches. But what they're not doing is they're getting rid of these SKU numbers that are very occasional usage. Now, I find that to be particularly distracting because I go in there to get a kit of product for doing a modification, and I can get half of it at a reasonable price and good product, but I can't get the other stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm stuck with I either go online, I've got a couple of wholesale HVAC people that I can buy from, or I can go to a wholesaler physically in the town that we're in. So what do I do? I mean, I'm stuck right now. I need an 810 adapter. It's a very simple adapter. One of those stores doesn't have them anymore.
Mhm.
So I don't even buy the duct from them. I just go online and I get it delivered to my house.
Yeah.
They haven't figured out that they're actually losing me as a client. And
They,
it's
yeah, you're exactly right. I
and
have,
I don't buy that much. I spent $30,000 from them in, 1 year. My high might have been 50,000.
well,
So I'm a small,
that's a pretty good customer.
well, maybe, but and I'm probably spending $1,000 a month no matter what right now with them, but they're going away. And
Yeah,
they need to smell the coffee on the writing on the wall because they're losing niches of their business.
yes, they
And
are.
once they lose the general contractor or the DIYer, if I'm going to do that for my HVAC, I'm going to do that for my plumbing, I'm going to do that for my electrical.
Hmm.
And, for example, I go into my electrical sections in a couple of these places, everything is locked up. I want
Yeah.
a 20 amp dual breaker and I can't get it. I've got to sit there and wait. And then when they give it to me, they don't give it to me. They actually take it out so that they don't trust me to take it out the door. And so I'm like, what is this? I mean, look at me. I'm paying with cash. I don't look like I'm going to run out the door and steal it, but they can't make that judgment. So every one of these little items, it's a $20 item. They have to walk to the sales. Now, I'm sorry, guys. They are pushing away their clients.
Yeah, well, I agree completely. I've gone through exactly the same thing. I've actually, because I am a little bit obtuse on stuff like this and spend a lot of time in retail, when that person comes up and I say, and now the problem I run into is really irrigation stuff. And so, it's like you have to have a certain piece. You're working on a project on a Saturday afternoon, and
Yeah.
you need to have that because that's what you're replacing. It broke, you're replacing it. And it's like, well, you don't have this piece, you're out of it. And, oh, I'm sorry, I guess we're out. Well, we're going to get to another next Thursday, we get our new stuff. But you know what? You can go online and get it. And I'm going, no, somehow you don't understand. I already buy everything from Amazon because you've pushed me away enough. I only came down here because you would have it today. See, now what has happened here is that Amazon has turned Home Depot into a convenience store,
Yeah.
but they're not acting like a convenience store. And neither is Home Depot, Lowe's, those big guys. They're still acting like warehouses. And of course, they do huge business for contractors. And, they'll probably do fine without you and me, John. But when you add Ray in, a big spender like Ray,
Yeah, that's right.
now the three of us, we could make an impact. So what is happening is, and this is called the circle of retail, which I studied way back in my retail class in business school. And this circle of retail is always interesting because retailers always push themselves from low price, volume, high service to much, much higher service to high profitability profile driven by the finance people. And somebody else comes in and cuts their legs off. Well, what's happening in these big stores now is that they're carrying so little, it's creating a new market for the old-fashioned hardware store. And right here in town, just 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away, we're going to have our first hardware store open in 3 or 4 months.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know about
Yeah,
this.
and we haven't had a hardware store in our town since Lowe's came on an old Carlson's hardware, and that's been what, 15 years. So we have to drive out to the suburbs in order to be able to buy all of these convenience items. And I'll tell you what, I am going to be spending as much money as I can in our local hardware store because I want them to stay. I want their market to work. And, so we're not getting that service on those small items. I don't need to buy lumber from the hardware store, so they don't have to deal with that. But they're going to have to be good on inventory. They better have all of the nuts and all of the bolts and all of the,
So let's talk
you
about this
know,
process. When I arrived in Redlands 25 years ago, we had three local hardware stores.
yeah,
Lowe's didn't exist and Depot didn't exist. In fact, I wished Lowe's did because I came from the Midwest and I shopped with Lowe's in the Midwest all the time and they moved out here. So it was interesting. But the hardware stores serviced most of the stuff. Sometimes you didn't get the same ongoing, repeated amounts, and sometimes you ran a little short of supplies, but they certainly were knowledgeable. They took care of you and they could solve the problem. And then they were kind of forced out by Lowe's and Home Depot coming in and buying your business because of convenience and selection and price. And so fine. And now they are under pressure because of Amazon and should I say Walmart. Walmart is actually, I've got to put a shout out to Walmart because Walmart is actually coming online with their own line offering that in many ways is much
Yeah,
more easier to use than Amazon because in Walmart, you're not shopping up against their own backed products. It
right.
seems to be an easier way of selecting the right
And
product.
I have found Walmart's prices to be lower because they're selling their own inventory most of the time.
Well, and I like it to be less confusing because now
Yeah,
you can actually, you're not bought off by whatever they're promoting. You're bought off by
yeah,
what you want to buy based on the descriptions. So at
yeah,
any rate, now in 20 years, we've gone through the cycle
yeah.
and now we're coming back with a,
And
so
that's the retail, the circle of retail that I was explaining. And, we've gone through it over and over and over again. We had Gibson's come in and they got killed by, you know, who was just recently out of business, Kmart. And then Kmart is now dead. And so, you can see that this continues to happen. And what happens there is that it creates niches, and we where the niche was absorbed, 15 years ago, and the last Ace Hardware store left out of the same shopping center it's coming back to. So Ace is taking a look at and they're very sophisticated on location analysis. Ace took a look at that and they said, you're not going to be able to survive here. We're going to close when the lease comes up. And now they're coming back in. They're taking a bigger spot, much larger spot, 3, 4 times bigger. And they're going to put in another store because they're figuring out that that market has, in fact, come back. Because who really wants to get on the highway and drive to buy a length of pipe because you misestimated how much you needed for your garden or whatever the case is. So now that's coming back. And so there's a niche they think is going to happen. So when small businesses are thinking about getting started in something new, it's really important for them to think about, okay, yes, value has to be created, but you also have to try your best to come up with a niche where nobody else will be. And if you can, we've been talking about areas where there's lots of competition, but if you could come up with a product that had very little, if any, competition by unique products, unique offerings, different kinds of service arrangements, that's where, if it works, that's where you can find a really good opportunity to start a business. So I hope that has elucidated just a little bit more about niches and value. At some point we'll put together a full-blown program on that. But any other defining ending comments here before we let our folks go for the weekend? I'm going to take that as a no. Hope both of you are muted.
well, I'm going to suggest that this is actually one of the greatest and most difficult pieces of a business owner's um, overview of his own business because we're so biased by what is normal. And what is normal is what we've helped create and provide and what we see out there. And we've got to some extent, look at something outside and come back and reevaluate who our client is. And we've got three clients. I mean, we've got the people who work in and around us, the stakeholders in our business. That's one of our clients. We need to keep our good team together, the people that we work with. That's one of our markets. We got to make sure we're on track with that. We've got the stakeholders who own the business, whether it's small or large, family or not, and then we've got the environment we are supporting, the community we're in, and the clients that exist in that. We're actually it's a mutually interoperative opportunity to provide value and add value for other people. It's very difficult to do. And I think the conversation, Ron, that you bring up and the questions that you bring up, um, while difficult to answer, are very valuable. And I think everybody could do some time to actually study it because it is shifting.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's an excellent point and good place to drop off. And the most important point perhaps, in this entire series of discussions about what to do when you open your business. If you don't get the niche right, if you don't get your value proposition right, you are probably not going to make it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't adjust and correct to customers, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't get that right, you're probably going to fail. And therefore, when you talk about preparation, I would say that in every one of the 6 or 7 businesses that I have started, and every one of them had market acceptance. And so I got every one of them right. The interesting part about that is that I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about this. It was like all of my waking moments were, will this really work? Does this work? Who is the customer? What value can I actually achieve? Because it's, say, just me, or if it's me and 2 or 3 or 4 employees, because I never started a business, well, I did start one business with 6 people, but for the most part, you start with a small group of people, and you have to figure that out. Where is the market? It takes years sometimes for the market to emerge. And if you have an expertise in plumbing or whatever, it may take years for your opportunity to enter the market, to make it, stick its head up and go, oh, I got it. I'm ready. I can do that. I can fit in that crack. I can fit in that niche, and nobody can get me because I've got this, and this. So don't be too fast to go into business, but make sure you get the value proposition right.
Well, I was going to add, Ron, to what you just said. I think your diamond is helpful for companies, particularly small business, who don't really understand what the customer wants. And to be able to divide it up into those 4 pieces, enable them to say, okay, where am I weak? Where am I strong? How do I fix this or adjust it so that my customers are more happy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. Well, good. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And we have another one in the can. I hope all of you will like and subscribe. We'll see you next week.
Yes, have a good weekend, gentlemen.
Mhm.